Alright, so today I want to introduce you to the Firefly ball python. The Firefly actually consists of two genes, the Fire and the Pastel. And essentially what the Fire does is it really lightens and enhances a lot of combinations. And when you mix it with the Pastel, you end up with a really bright yellow snake with a lot of contrast. Looks really amazing. As a matter of fact, you can actually use the Firefly kind of as a base template and work other genes into the mix to make some really bright and flashy combinations. Has a lot of potential just as the standalone, as well as working other genes into the mix. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to bring you over to the internet. I want to show you what the Fire and the Pastel look like and how they combine and how you can mix other genes into the Firefly to make some really impressive looking ball pythons. Alright, so I'm going to jump over here on Morphmarket.com and I want to start with the Pastel ball python. The Pastel is actually one ingredient of the Firefly, and essentially what the Pastel does is it really enhances a lot of the yellow color in the snake. And I'd say when it comes to pastels, they are really variable. Some of them are really super bright yellow and some of them are kind of browned out. As a matter of fact, I'd say most pastels tend to brown out a little bit as they age and mature. And a lot of times with the pastels, you'll also see kind of a reduction in the pattern, and it'll lose a lot of the kind of the Roswell gray alien head patterns in the Pastel. And here is another ingredient of the Firefly, and that is the Fire. And I would say when it comes to kind of a sleeper gene, the Fire is the king of sleepers. It's kind of interesting. You look at it as a standalone morph and you kind of try to imagine in your mind what the Fire can do in other combos, and it's almost like you can't even imagine the ultimate potential of the Fire when you're mixing it in with a lot of genes. And essentially what it does is it really lightens a lot of combinations and it really cleans up the background. And here's what happens if you mix the Fire with the Pastel and make the Firefly. And take a look at this. This is such an amazing snake. As a matter of fact, I was just at the last reptile show and someone walked up to me and said, "Hey, check out this Firefly." And let me tell you, it was almost as bright as this snake. And let me tell you, sometimes you look at these pictures and you're thinking, all right, is this really photoshopped or is this really a real snake, the real colors? And let me tell you, these Fireflies can be intensely bright, and it has a lot of contrast too, so you see a lot of sharpness between the yellow and the blacks in the snake. And essentially what I want to do from here is I want to show you some other genes, just the base gene first, and I want to show you what that gene looks like when mixed into the Firefly, so you can kind of see the ultimate potential of the Firefly working other genes into the mix. And I want to start with the Enchi. The Enchi is, as a matter of fact, someone was asking me the other day, what is one of the most popular genes in all of ball pythons? And really, Enchi is probably the most popular as far as just sheer numbers over here on Morphmarket. And essentially what the Enchi does is it really reduces the pattern even more than a Pastel. You'll see this really reduces the pattern almost, it really depends on the line of Enchi too. A lot of Enchis can be really variable. You can actually make a super Enchi with two genes of the Enchi and really super reduce the pattern. Sometimes in certain lines of Enchi, the super Enchi is just little tiny dots right on the top of the snake. It's pretty amazing. And some Enchis are really hard to pick out between an Enchi and a normal. It's super variable. And a lot of times with the Enchi, it also brings out a lot of the yellow or the orange in some cases. I'd say it really depends on the line of Enchi. Here's what happens when you work Enchi into the Firefly. Take a look at this. Essentially you keep the really high contrast in the bright yellow snake, and the Enchi really reduces the pattern of the snake. And look at the head stamp on this thing. The head pattern is really wild. It almost looks like a cartoon face or something on top of the head. Makes for a really awesome combo. And here's another combo that's really awesome. This is actually, let's start with the Clown. The Clown's actually a recessive mutation, so it's a little bit harder to actually work things into the Clown. You actually need 2 copies of the Clown to get a visual. But if you can actually work the Fire and the Pastel into the Clown, this is what you get. This is pretty amazing. Take a look at this. This is a Firefly Clown, the Pastel, Fire, and Clown. And the Clown, as I'd say, it's probably the king of combos when it it comes to recessive mutations. Works really well with almost any other gene. And when you mix fire and pastel into the clown, you get this really amazing looking snake. And I really love the head on this. It just has such a cute head on this snake. It's pretty awesome. And as a matter of fact, if you actually look at some of the prices on these clowns, these are pretty high. As a matter of fact, this one sold for $750. And let me tell you, when it comes to kind of high-end snakes that are really in high demand, I'd say the clown is where it's at. Everybody goes crazy over clowns and clown combinations. Here's another one I kind of want to throw in. This is a freeway. This is a little bit more difficult than even the clown to work in the pastel and the fire. The freeway is actually an asphalt and a yellow belly, not to be confused with a highway. The highway is actually the gravel and the yellow belly. Really close. I'd say the asphalt and the gravel are pretty much almost the same genes, but you can definitely see some differences. Almost two different lines of the same gene. And the problem with this is it's actually an allelic combination. So if you actually took a freeway and bred it to something else, half the offspring would come out yellow belly, half would come out as asphalt. So if you can actually work in the pastel and the fire, you get some really amazing results. Take a look at this. This is the Firefly freeway. It makes for a really crazy looking snake. Let me tell you, when it comes to freeways, especially when you mix in pastel, you can get some really insane results. Almost this bright yellow electric pattern coming down the top of the snake. I'd say this is probably one of the projects that I want to eventually get into, but it comes to the point where you almost run out of rack space in your reptile room, and you kind of have to choose the projects you're in, and this is definitely one of the ones high on my list, the freeway project. So this is actually the axanthic. There's several lines of axanthic and they're not compatible, so you kind of have to be careful when you're working with the axanthic. You really don't want to pick up two axanthics and breed them together without knowing if it's the certain line of axanthic like the VPI or the TSK. So if you actually bred two of those lines together, you'd end up with all normal snakes, double head for each line of axanthic. It gets a little bit confusing, but the axanthic is one of the more unusual ones if you actually work in pastel and fire into axanthic. Let me tell you, this is like the ultimate axanthic combo, working these two genes in, and look at this. This is so amazing. As a matter of fact, if you actually have seen the Stormtrooper, this is probably as close as you can get to that famous Stormtrooper ball python. It almost looks exactly like it. As a matter of fact, I was kind of surprised at the price on this one. As a matter of fact, if this one was probably for sale and I had the money, I probably would have bought this snake. This actually sold for $1,200. Pretty amazing. This is actually the leopard ball python. The leopard is, I'd say, it really works well with almost any other gene. Essentially what the leopard does is it really scrambles up the pattern. You can definitely see in this one, instead of reducing it like an inchy, it really kind of just jumbles up the pattern. And I'd say the leopard is, a lot of people say it's a dark morph, but I'd say it's kind of a pseudo dark morph. So if you actually work leopard into something like a coral glow, something that's already bright, a lot of times you really don't see any darker of a snake as a result working those two genes together. But if the snake actually has something dark, like it has, you know, like a GHI or something, then you work leopard into it, it really darkens the dark parts of the snake. So really the leopard's kind of, you know, on the edge of being a dark morph. If you have some dark spots in the snake, it almost makes them jet black, which is kind of interesting. And here's what happens if you work Firefly into the leopard. Take a look at this, and it's kind of the, you know, you actually see a lot of the dark here being darkened even further from the leopard, and you see the pattern really jumbled up. I'd say this is probably one of the most impressive Firefly combos, working leopard into the Firefly. Here's another gene. This is actually the banana. The banana is the same thing as the coral glow. A lot of people think it's the same thing. A lot of people actually separate the two lines. Some people actually list snakes over here saying it's a banana slash coral glow. Essentially the same thing. And a lot of people, well, a lot of people actually think one line is brighter than the other, but I've actually seen kind of both ways of both lines. I have a really bright line of coral glow that I'm working with, although I've seen a lot of really bright specific examples of the banana. banana. And here's what happens if you work banana into a Firefly. Take a look at this. This is kind of unexpected as far as what you would normally think as far as, you know, enhancing the yellows and really cleaning up. And keep in mind the fire in a lot of combinations, essentially what it does is it lightens the background of the snake and kind of overall lightens it. And in a lot of combos, instead of bringing out a lot of the yellow, it'll actually kind of fade it into more of a lighter, creamier color. And kind of the trick with the banana is really visually dominant, so it's really tough in a lot of cases to actually get a lot of stuff to actually shine through the banana. As a matter of fact, if you take banana and add pastel, you almost can't even see the pastel in the banana, and then you add fire on top of that and it just kind of really lightens it. It looks like it also really jumbles up the pattern too. Makes for a really awesome looking snake. A little bit different than what you would expect with working something into a Firefly. So here's another kind of a unique anomaly. This is actually the vanilla. The vanilla is really close to the fire, although it works differently when you mix it in with a lot of combos. And it's actually allelic with fire. So if you actually take fire and vanilla, work it together, you get a vanilla fire that acts like a super. You breed it to something else, half the offspring come out as vanilla, half come out as fire. And this is what happens if you take vanilla and work it into a Firefly. Take a look at this. You actually get the vanilla scream. This is the vanilla scream is the vanilla, the fire, and the pastel. As a matter of fact, if you just have a vanilla and the fire, it's called the vanilla cream. And then you add the pastel and it's the vanilla scream. So I'd say on this one, it's you could actually produce it by crossing a Firefly with a vanilla. But if you actually took a vanilla scream and bred it to something else, you really couldn't reproduce this unless the snake you were breeding it to either had fire or vanilla. So it's a little bit more difficult to actually produce the vanilla screen. So another thing I wanted to do is in addition to showing you all these snakes, you're like, all right, I want to start with the Firefly and I want to breed it into some other genes and make some of these combos. And I want to show you a couple different ways you can actually approach it and some of the odds as far as what you can expect with some of these combos. So I actually just started over here on the Genetic Wizard and I typed in fire and pastel, which is the Firefly, and I bred it to an Enchi. This is a ball python genetic calculator over here. And you can actually hit calculate and it shows you the odds of all the different snakes that you'll get and all the possibilities. So if you actually bred those two snakes together, you'd only have a 1 in 8 chance that you would get the Enchi Firefly. This is essentially what you're looking for. And the more genes you're actually trying to put into the mix, the more difficult it's actually to try to, you know, actually produce that result. So, you know, if you actually have a clutch of maybe 8 eggs and you take your Firefly, breed it to something else, maybe only 1 egg in the whole clutch is going to be your Firefly plus that gene. But there's actually a way you can increase your odds significantly. And take a look at this. This is kind of a shortcut. If you want to take a really big shortcut, you can actually buy a snake like this. Take a look at this. This is actually a black-eyed leucistic, an all-white snake with black eyes. This one happens to be a super fire and a super pastel. Has a super, 2 copies of the fire, 2 copies of the pastel. As a matter of fact, you know, I didn't even look at the price until now. This is actually a $1,000 snake. So it's a shortcut, but it's going to cost you a lot of money to actually take this shortcut. So if you actually took the super fire, super pastel, and you bred it to something else, every single offspring is going to be a Firefly. Super powerful snake. As a matter of fact, I came over here and I think there is only about a dozen of them over here that has ever been produced on Morphmarket. And as a matter of fact, this one's a male, so you can actually breed it through your collection and make all Fireflies from this. I actually pulled it up in the genetic calculator and I crossed the super fire, super pastel with an Enchi and hit calculate, and you can kind of see your odds here. Your odds would be 50% of the time you get Fireflies, which is a really impressive snake, and 50% of the time you would get Enchi Fireflies. So you can definitely take a lot of shortcuts. As a matter of fact, it would be really awesome to buy this snake and just kind of breed it through your collection, make a whole bunch of Fireflies and a whole bunch of Firefly combinations. Alright, so it is time for the question of the day. And Seth Sharp asks, Is there a difference between males and females when it comes to colors and patterns in ball pythons? And that is a very good question. As a matter of fact, pretty much I've seen across the board, there's really no difference between the males and the females when it comes to the colors or patterns, although a lot of people will claim that the females tend to get a lot bigger than the males. Although I think instead of a genetic anomaly, I think that is more of the keeper, the guy that's actually feeding the snakes. If you actually feed a snake more, it'll grow faster and bigger than if you actually fed that snake less. And as a matter of fact, if you actually have female ball pythons, a lot of times people are thinking, all right, I want to breed this female, and the bigger it is, the faster I can get eggs, and the more eggs you can get with a bigger female. So I think a lot of people are thinking, all right, I want to feed my female more, a little bit bigger rodents, maybe more frequently, so I can get to breeding size quicker or bigger clutches of eggs. And I think it's kind of that mentality that really drives the growth of the females versus it being kind of a genetic factor between the males and the females as far as the size of the ball pythons. So that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.